Aita for defending my son 15 after he hit his teacher? My son punched his teacher, like a full swing to the face, and the entire classroom went dead silent. The sound of the hit was loud enough that even kids walking by the hall stopped to look inside. His teacher, Mr. J, stumbled backward, dropped the marker he was holding, and grabbed his cheek like he couldn't believe what just happened. My son's chest was heaving, his fists still clenched, and for a split second, I swear the whole world froze. Then came the gasps, the screams, and the chaos. But here's the part that shocked everyone even more. When the principal stormed in and demanded answers, I stood up for my son. And now, everyone is asking, am I the asshole for defending him after he hit his teacher? Before I explain why I did what I did, let me back up, because this wasn't just some random act of violence. No, this story started way before the punch, and honestly, I don't even know if I'm right or wrong anymore. My son, who I'll call Liam, is 15. He's not some troublemaker kid. He's not perfect, sure, but he's quiet, keeps to himself, and honestly spends most of his time drawing or gaming. He's always been sensitive, maybe too sensitive, and I've worried about that because kids can be cruel. High school has been tough on him, not because of grades, he's actually smart, but because of how other people treat him. It started small last year, kids making fun of the way he dressed or calling him weird because he preferred sketching characters in his notebook instead of joining football or hanging out with the cool kids. He never complained much, but sometimes I'd hear him in his room late at night, whispering on Discord to friends about how much he hated going to school. Then this year, things escalated. A group of boys in his class, let's just call them the Wolves because that's how they acted, decided he was their target. They trip him in the halls, steal his stuff, even rip his sketches in front of him. He tried ignoring it, but ignoring bullies doesn't always make them stop. One time, he came home with his hoodie ripped. Another time, he refused to eat because someone dumped food all over his lunch tray. I went to the school, I complained, and every time they gave me the same answer. We'll look into it, but nothing changed. The worst part, his teacher, Mr. J, the same one he later hit, wasn't just ignoring it, he was feeding it. Liam told me that Mr. J would sometimes laugh when the other kids made jokes about him. Once, when Liam was presenting a project, the class started making animal noises because they call him Llama instead of Liam. Instead of shutting it down, Mr. J smirked and said, well, at least they're paying attention. Liam was humiliated. I wanted to storm into that classroom myself, but Liam begged me not to. He said it would just make it worse, and I didn't want him to feel like I was making him a bigger target. So I bit my tongue, and now I hate myself for that. The breaking point came last week. Liam had been working on this huge art project for weeks. He stayed up late, poured his heart into it, and honestly, it was beautiful. He wanted to present it in front of the class, even though public speaking makes him nervous. When the day came, he stood in front of everyone, holding his poster, and started explaining his piece. The wolves started snickering right away, whispering to each other. Liam kept talking, his voice shaking, but then Mr. J interrupted him. And not to stop the bullying, no, he interrupted to say, is that supposed to be a person? It looks more like a blob. The class erupted in laughter. Liam froze. His face turned red, and in that moment, he snapped. He dropped his project, walked right up to Mr. J, and before anyone could stop him, he punched him. Silence, shock, kids whispering, oh my God. That's when the principal came running in, demanding to know what happened. Everyone expected me to scold Liam, drag him out, maybe even apologize to Mr. J on the spot. But instead, I said, loud and clear, he had every right. And that's where things exploded even more. The principal's jaw dropped. The teacher was clutching his face. Other parents were called in. Now there's talk of suspension, maybe even expulsion, and the school is painting my son as some violent delinquent. But I know what really happened. And this is where I'm stuck, because I defended him. I told them if they won't protect my kid, then he'll protect himself. But people are saying I'm teaching him that violence is okay. Am I? Or am I finally doing what the school should have done months ago? But here's the kicker. The moment after I said those words, something happened that made the entire situation spiral even more out of control. My son punched his teacher, a full swing, knuckles cracking against skin, and the entire classroom went silent, like someone had pressed a mute button on life itself. Mr. J stumbled back, eyes wide, clutching his face like he couldn't believe a 15-year-old had just decked him in front of 30 witnesses. Some kids gasped, some laughed nervously, and a few even pulled out their phones, because of course they did. The door burst open just seconds later, and the principal stormed in. What on earth is going on here? His voice echoed through the hall, but I didn't flinch, because instead of lecturing my son or apologizing to the teacher like everyone expected, I stood up and said clearly, he had every right. Dead silence again, and then chaos. The principal's eyes nearly popped out of his head. What do you mean he had every right? He assaulted a teacher. I mean exactly what I said, I shot back, my voice sharper than I thought it could be. If you had done your job and protected my son from the constant bullying and humiliation, he wouldn't have been pushed this far. So yes, I'm defending him. Whispers spread like wildfire around the room. Some kids were grinning, some parents who had been called in for other matters peeked in from the hallway, and you could feel the tension snapping like a rubber band stretched too tight. Mr. J was still holding his face, but when he lowered his hand, I saw it, blood running from his nose. He looked at me with pure rage, like I had just betrayed him by taking Liam's side. And then it happened, the extreme twist that changed everything. Mr. J didn't stay quiet. He didn't even try to de-escalate. Instead, in front of everyone, he shouted, "Your son is a freak. He's been a problem since day one, and maybe if you raised him properly, he wouldn't be such a violent little monster." The room exploded. Kids gasped, parents yelled, the principal tried to shush everyone, but it was too late. Liam's face crumpled, his eyes watering, and I swear I felt something inside me snap. Because that wasn't just a teacher lashing out, this was proof. Proof that this man had been tearing my son down all along. I stepped forward, pointing right at him. "Say that again," I said through clenched teeth. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but fury. The entire class went dead quiet, waiting, almost daring him to keep going. And Mr. J, he did. He smirked, blood still on his lip, and said, "The truth hurts, doesn't it?" That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about a punch. This wasn't about school policy, or rules, or discipline. This was war. But before I could even open my mouth to respond, Liam did something none of us saw coming. The second Mr. J smirked and muttered those words, "The truth hurts, doesn't it?" Liam snapped again. But this time it wasn't with his fists. He didn't throw another punch. He did something that no one, not even me, could have predicted. He walked over to his eye project. Remember the poster he had poured his heart into? The one that got mocked until he lost it and punched his teacher? Liam picked it up off the floor, held it high for everyone to see, and then tore it straight down the middle. Reap. The sound cut through the silence sharper than any shout. His classmates froze, eyes glued to him. He didn't stop there. He ripped the halves into quarters, then into scraps, until pieces of paper fluttered to the floor like snow. His hands were shaking, his breathing was heavy, but his voice was steady when he finally spoke. "You don't get to laugh at me anymore," he said, staring straight at Mr. J. "None of you do." The room was dead quiet. Nobody laughed this time, not even the wolves, the kids who had spent months making his life hell. For the first time, they looked scared. The principal tried to regain control. "Liam, that's enough. You need to come with me to the office right now." But Liam didn't move. He stood there, staring down his teacher, his shoulders squared like he was ready for whatever came next. And honestly, in that moment, he didn't look like my shy, quiet son anymore. He looked like someone who had finally had enough. That was the new extreme event. The boy who always kept his head down, who avoided conflict, who swallowed every insult thrown at him, was now standing up in the loudest way possible. The less extreme part came right after. The principal dragged us both to his office. The walk down the hall felt endless. Every student we passed whispered and pointed, but Liam kept his chin up. He didn't say a word. When we got into the office, the principal shut the door hard. "This is unacceptable," he snapped. "Violence against a teacher? Disrespect? Destroying your own schoolwork in front of the class? Liam is facing expulsion." "Expulsion?" I shot back. "Are you serious? My son has been bullied for months in this school. He's been mocked, humiliated, even by your own staff, and you want to punish him?" The principal rubbed his temples. "I understand your frustration, but hitting a teacher crosses a line that cannot be ignored. You, as his parent, should not be condoning this." "Oh, don't lecture me," I said, leaning forward. "Because if this school had done its job, none of this would have happened. He wouldn't have been pushed to the edge. He wouldn't have been defending himself in the only way he knew how." The principal sighed, clearly frustrated, but he stayed calm. He said there would be a disciplinary board meeting at the end of the week to decide Liam's fate. Until then, Liam was suspended. We gathered our things and walked out. Liam stayed silent all the way to the car. I wanted to ask him what was going through his head, but I didn't want to push. I could tell he was still boiling inside. That night at home, I finally sat him down. "Liam," I said softly, "I need to know what's going on inside your head right now. Talk to me." For the first time in months, he looked me straight in the eye. "I don't care if they expel me," he said. "At least now they know I'm not afraid of them anymore." My heart broke. Because on one hand, I was proud of him for standing up for himself. On the other, I was terrified of what this meant for his future. Expulsion would follow him. It could ruin everything he'd worked for. The calmer days that followed almost made me believe things might settle down. Liam stayed home, drawing in his sketchbook, barely talking, but I thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind us. But I was wrong, because when the disciplinary meeting finally came, and we walked into that room, it wasn't just the principal and Mr. J waiting for us. No, sitting there, arms crossed with a smug grin, were the wolves and their parents. And what happened next? That was the new extreme event that made my stomach drop. When Liam and I walked into the disciplinary board meeting, I thought it would just be the principal, Mr. J, and maybe a counselor or two. But no, sitting there, smirking like they had already won, were the wolves and their parents. There were 4 of them, sprawled out like they owned the room. Their parents looked equally smug, like this was some kind of show they had front row seats for. My stomach twisted. This wasn't going to be a fair hearing. This was an ambush. The principal cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. We are here today to discuss the incident involving Liam, where he physically assaulted a teacher during class. Instantly, one of the wolves' parents cut in. Assault is exactly the right word. Frankly, I'm shocked this dangerous child hasn't been expelled already. My son tells me Liam has been a problem for years, always acting out, always threatening others. That's a lie, I snapped before she could finish. Liam has never threatened anyone. Your sons have been tormenting him since the start of the school year, and everyone here knows it. The wolves smirked wider, like this was all some sick game. One of them even muttered under his breath, "Cry about it." Liam heard it. I saw his fists clench under the table, but he didn't move. He just stared at them with cold, steady eyes. Then Mr. J spoke up, holding a tissue to his nose. With all due respect, this isn't about bullying. This is about a student who thought it was acceptable to physically attack a teacher. I've dedicated my life to helping kids, and this is the thanks I get? A punch in the face? What message does that send to the other students? I couldn't hold back anymore. I slammed my hand on the table. You humiliated my son in front of the entire class. You mocked his work, you let those boys tear him down day after day, and you laughed about it. Do you honestly expect me to sit here and act like you're the victim? Gasps filled the room. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but the principal raised his hand for silence. Let's keep this civil. We need to hear all sides before we make a decision. And then, to my shock, Liam spoke. His voice was quiet at first, but steady. They don't care about my side. He looked around the table, straight into the eyes of each adult there. None of you ever cared. I told teachers, I told counselors, I even told you, he pointed at the principal, and you just said you'd look into it. But nothing changed. Every day, I came to school waiting for it to stop, and it never did. The room went dead silent. Even the wolves weren't smirking anymore. Liam's voice grew louder. I didn't want to punch him. I didn't even want to fight. But when he made fun of me in front of everyone, I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted it to stop. I wanted all of it to stop. My heart was pounding. This was my son, finally telling his truth in front of the people who had ignored him for so long. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they would listen. But then one of the wolves' dads chuckled. Actually chuckled. So let me get this straight. You're blaming your violence on my son and his friends? That's rich. Maybe if you toughened him up at home, he wouldn't crumble every time someone teased him. That was it. Liam shot out of his seat so fast, the chair screeched across the floor. His eyes blazed. You think this is a joke? He shouted. You think ruining my life is funny? The room erupted into chaos. The principal tried to calm everyone down. Parents were shouting over each other. And the wolves were laughing again, because of course they were. That was the extreme event that kicked off Chapter 3. Liam finally exploding in front of everyone. The chaos eventually simmered down when the principal threatened to clear the room. Liam sat back down, shaking, and I put a hand on his shoulder. He didn't shrug me off this time. The board said they would take everything into account before making a decision, but it was clear they were leaning toward expulsion. The words hung heavy in the air like a storm cloud. When we left the school, Liam didn't say a word. He just walked straight to the car, got in, and stared out the window the whole way home. I wanted to comfort him, but I knew nothing I said could fix what just happened. The next day, though, things calmed down slightly. Liam spent most of the day sketching again, quieter, almost like he was drained from the fight. I thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind us. But I was wrong, because 2 days later, I got a phone call that made my blood run cold. It wasn't from the school. It wasn't from the principal. It was from the police.
When the phone rang, I didn't recognize the number. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me to pick up. Hello? Is this the parent of Liam last name? Yes, I said cautiously. This is Officer Daniels with the local town police department. We need you and your son to come down to the station immediately. My heart stopped. The station? Why? What's going on? I'd rather explain in person, the officer said, his tone clipped, but it involves an incident reported by the school. I felt my knees weaken. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped the phone. We'll be there, I whispered, before hanging up. I turned to Liam, who was sitting at the kitchen table sketching. He looked up at me, concern in his eyes. Who was that? I swallowed hard. The police. They want us at the station. His pencil dropped from his hand. His face went pale. Am I in trouble? I don't know, I admitted, though my stomach already knew the answer. That was the new extreme event, the moment the school escalated everything beyond suspension or expulsion. Now we were dealing with the law. At the station, Officer Daniels led us into a small windowless room. He shut the door and sat across from us with a folder in his hand. He didn't waste time. Mr. J has filed a police report, he said bluntly. He's accusing Liam of assault. As you know, punching someone, even in school, can be considered a criminal offense. My jaw dropped. Assault? He's a child. He's 15. That doesn't make the charge go away, the officer said. Depending on how the district attorney wants to handle this, Liam could be looking at juvenile court. I felt the room spin. Juvenile court? My son, my quiet, artistic son, could have a record because of this? Liam's voice broke the silence. He deserved it, he said flatly. He humiliated me in front of everyone. He let them bully me every single day. Nobody ever did anything, so I did. The officer sighed, tapping the folder with his pen. That may be how you feel, but the law doesn't always see it that way. We need to set up a formal interview. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and tell him this was insane. But instead, I clenched my fists and said, fine, when? The officer scheduled it for the next morning. Until then, we were allowed to go home. But the weight of that folder followed us out of the station like a curse. The rest of the day was quieter, a less extreme stretch of the storm. Liam holed up in his room, barely talking, while I spent hours on the phone calling anyone who might know how to help. I reached out to a lawyer, begged for advice, tried to figure out how much trouble we were really in. That night, I sat awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't stop thinking about how quickly everything had spiraled. First a punch, now the police. What would come next? I got my answer sooner than I thought. Because the next morning, when we showed up for Liam's formal interview, we weren't the only ones waiting. Mr. J was there too. And he wasn't alone. He had a lawyer sitting beside him. And what that lawyer said as soon as the interview started, that was the new extreme event that made my blood run cold all over again. When Liam and I walked into that cold gray room for his police interview, I thought I'd prepared myself for the worst. I'd spent the whole night rehearsing arguments in my head, thinking of every way to protect my son. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Because there, sitting across the table with his face still swollen and bruised, was Mr. J. And next to him, in a crisp suit with a leather briefcase, sat his lawyer. The officer nodded politely. We'll begin shortly, but first, Mr. J's legal representative has something to say. The lawyer leaned forward, hands folded neatly on the table. His voice was calm, but every word felt like a blade. My client has decided not only to pursue criminal charges for assault, he said, staring directly at me, but also to file a civil lawsuit against your son and your family for damages. We are seeking compensation for medical expenses, emotional distress, and loss of professional reputation. The room tilted. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. You're suing us? He's 15. He's a child. The lawyer didn't blink. Your son is old enough to know right from wrong, and a violent act, no matter the age, carries consequences. My client has already suffered damage to his career and standing in the school. Parents are questioning his ability to control a classroom. This will affect him for years. Someone must be held accountable. My jaw dropped. Accountable? He's a child. He's 15. That doesn't make the charge go away, the officer said. Depending on how the district attorney wants to handle this, Liam could be looking at juvenile court. I felt the room spin. Juvenile court? My son, my quiet, artistic son, could have a record because of this? Liam's voice broke the silence. He deserved it, he said flatly. He humiliated me in front of everyone. He let them bully me every single day. Nobody ever did anything, so I did. The officer sighed, tapping the folder with his pen. That may be how you feel, but the law doesn't always see it that way. We need to set up a formal interview. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and tell him this was insane. But instead, I clenched my fists and said, fine, when? The officer scheduled it for the next morning. Until then, we were allowed to go home. But the weight of that folder followed us out of the station like a curse. The rest of the day was quieter, a less extreme stretch of the storm. Liam holed up in his room, barely talking, while I spent hours on the phone calling anyone who might know how to help. I reached out to a lawyer, begged for advice, tried to figure out how much trouble we were really in. That night, I sat awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't stop thinking about how quickly everything had spiraled. First a punch, now the police. What would come next? I got my answer sooner than I thought. Because the next morning, when we showed up for Liam's formal interview, we weren't the only ones waiting. Mr. J was there too. And he wasn't alone. He had a lawyer sitting beside him. And what that lawyer said as soon as the interview started, that was the new extreme event that made my blood run cold all over again. When Liam and I walked into that cold gray room for his police interview, I thought I'd prepared myself for the worst. I'd spent the whole night rehearsing arguments in my head, thinking of every way to protect my son. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Because there, sitting across the table with his face still swollen and bruised, was Mr. J. And next to him, in a crisp suit with a leather briefcase, sat his lawyer. The officer nodded politely. We'll begin shortly, but first, Mr. J's legal representative has something to say. The lawyer leaned forward, hands folded neatly on the table. His voice was calm, but every word felt like a blade. My client has decided not only to pursue criminal charges for assault, he said, staring directly at me, but also to file a civil lawsuit against your son and your family for damages. We are seeking compensation for medical expenses, emotional distress, and loss of professional reputation. The room tilted. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. You're suing us? He's 15. He's a child. The lawyer didn't blink. Your son is old enough to know right from wrong, and a violent act, no matter the age, carries consequences. My client has already suffered damage to his career and standing in the school. Parents are questioning his ability to control a classroom. This will affect him for years. Someone must be held accountable. I gripped the table so hard, my knuckles turned white. Accountable? You're the one who tormented him. You stood there and let those boys rip him apart every day. And now you want to ruin his life because he finally stood up for himself? Mr. J's lip curled. Your son is dangerous. If the school won't protect us from him, then I will. That was the bombshell. Not just criminal charges, not just expulsion, but a lawsuit. An attack designed to crush us completely. Liam's face went pale. His voice shook. So you get to make fun of me, let everyone laugh at me, and I'm the one who's dangerous? His eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. You're the reason I hate school. You're the reason I hate myself. For the first time, the officer's expression softened. He shifted uncomfortably, but the lawyer pressed on, relentless. If your son does not agree to plead guilty and issue a written apology, we will take this case as far as it needs to go. Juvenile court, civil court, whatever it takes. Silence filled the room. I felt the walls closing in, the air thick like tar in my lungs. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to drag Liam out of there and never come back. But I couldn't, because this was real. This was war. The interview ended in a blur. Papers were signed, dates were set. We left the station with more questions than answers. Would Liam be branded a criminal? Would we lose everything to this lawsuit? Was this teacher really willing to destroy a 15-year-old just to protect his pride? The drive home was silent, broken only by the sound of Liam's pencil scratching in his sketchbook. He wasn't drawing heroes this time. He wasn't drawing fantasy worlds or creatures. He was drawing Mr. J. And in the drawing, Mr. J wasn't standing tall and smug. He was small, weak, powerless. Mom, Liam finally whispered, eyes still on the paper. What if they win? What if they take everything away? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Then we fight back, I said. My voice cracked, but I meant every word. But even as I said it, a chill ran down my spine. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't over. And something in Liam's eyes, something dark, something burning, told me he wasn't done either. And that night, as I lay awake, I heard him moving in his room. The sound of papers being crumpled, drawers being opened, and a whispered promise under his breath. They won't laugh at me anymore. That was the chilling epilogue. Because I don't know if he meant it as hope, or as a threat. The interview at the station left us shaken, but the real storm came weeks later when the disciplinary board finally held their final meeting. The lawsuit was looming, the police files still open, but the school wanted to resolve the educational side of things. The room felt colder this time. The principal sat stiff, board members avoided eye contact, and Mr. J glared at Liam like he was some criminal who had ruined his life. The wolves and their parents weren't there this time, thank God, but the damage had already been done. The board chair cleared her throat. After reviewing all testimonies, the evidence, and the seriousness of the incident, we have made our decision. Liam will be expelled, effective immediately. The words cut through me like glass. Expelled. It was official now. His school career, his future, the friendships he'd managed to cling onto, all gone with one sentence. Liam sat perfectly still. No tears, no outburst, just silence. And that silence was scarier than any scream. I argued, I begged, I threw everything I had at them, but it was over. The meeting ended with the sound of a gavel and the scrape of chairs. They left us sitting there in a room that suddenly felt way too big. That night, I tried to comfort Liam. I told him we'd find another school, that this wasn't the end of his life, that he was stronger than this. But he barely looked at me. He just kept drawing, page after page after page. The days that followed blurred together. The lawsuit paperwork arrived in the mail, lawyers called, bills piled up, and I felt like I was drowning. But Liam, he seemed almost calm, too calm. He didn't complain, didn't lash out. He just kept working on something in his sketchbook. Then, one night, he came into the living room and handed me a drawing. It was Mr. J, but not like before. This time, Mr. J was sitting at a desk, surrounded by empty chairs, his classroom completely deserted. His eyes were hollow, his mouth twisted into a grimace. And above him, written in bold letters, Liam had scrawled, "This is what he deserves." I looked up at him, trying to read his face. Liam, what does this mean? He gave me a small, almost chilling smile. It means he can't take anything else from me. He already lost. I didn't know what to say. For the first time, I couldn't tell if my son felt broken or free. The next morning, I found his sketchbook closed neatly on his desk. On the last page, there was just one sentence written in shaky handwriting. They won't laugh at me anymore. And that was the end. So here we are. The school board made their final decision. Liam is officially expelled. No second chances, no appeal. They didn't even pretend to care about the bullying, the humiliation, or the way his teacher egged it all on. They only cared about the punch. On top of that, Mr. J's lawyer is pushing forward with the civil lawsuit. They want money for damages, emotional distress, and loss of reputation, as if my son's life hasn't already been ripped apart enough. I tried to hold it together, but honestly, I feel like we're drowning. The legal bills are stacking up, and Liam's future feels uncertain. I keep telling him this isn't the end, that we'll find another school, another way forward, but he barely responds anymore. All he does now is draw, page after page after page. And on the last page, he wrote one single sentence in shaky handwriting. They won't laugh at me anymore. I don't know if that's hope or something darker. So Reddit, here's where I'm stuck. I defended my son when he punched his teacher. I refused to apologize for it because I believe he was pushed too far and the school failed him. Now he's expelled, facing court, and our lives are being torn apart piece by piece. Am I the asshole for standing by him?